This is a quick overview of 4 models under the multi-site umbrella. Just for those of you that aren't aware of the scope, just so you have a visual image, and then when Scott talks more about the benefits and goes into more detail, you'll have a sense of what we're talking about. This is new ground, folks. This is looking at doing business in a whole different way. It's exciting. It's scary as hell, but it's also really, really exciting. So there are 4 models. The first one is the branch model. The distinctive characteristics, as Scott talked earlier, most of these have one board, one budget, one mission, and one staff team, so it's shared resources. In a branch model, there's a mother church, the big church that gives birth to little baby churches. And in the branch model, the branches are supported heavily by the mother church through the material, so it might be material for small group ministry. It might be adult faith development material that they provide. And then they also provide sermons. So they could, and the one example I'll show you in a moment, they provide it electronically, where they may download or upload a sermon to a website, and then the branch downloads the sermon, and then they watch it, and they can watch it on the same day. Or they put it up on the internet, or they make a DVD of it and send it to the branch so that the next Sunday, the people in the branch will watch that sermon.
And Mark, if I could jump in here. When you see these, Mark and I tried to highlight the black, or the bold pieces that make it this model more distinctive. And when you see shared material, that's important to distinguish between actual staff. So you see, that's a model in which one church would be providing material to support versus one staff sharing, being at all the different locations.
And that's the real distinctive characteristic of the branch model, that the staff, particularly ministers, don't go out to the branches necessarily, but they provide that resource material from a distance. And then it's up to the members of the branch to do a worship service or provide other activities. But it does rely on really strong volunteers and lay leaders. The example of the branch model is the Congregation in Albuquerque, which has been doing this for a while now. They have 3 branches, Carlsbad, East Mountains, and Socorro, which are, from what I understand, pretty far away from the church in Albuquerque. So otherwise, these people would not have access to a spiritual community, but primarily electronically, they were able to connect with the church in Albuquerque. This is also known as a satellite, but we prefer to use the term branch. I think it's a better visualization. That's the first model. The second model is the campus model. It's similar to the branch model, but there is one major difference. Again, there's one board, one budget, one mission, one staff team. There's a big mother church that gives birth to little baby churches, and I mean that in an affectionate way. I don't mean like baby.
Nothing wrong with babies.
No, I used to be one myself. The campus model is distinct because there are ministers that go out to the other campuses. So a congregation may have lay-led services maybe twice a month, and then they'll have a minister that will come in twice a month. That will rotate around the various campuses. They are full-service churches. Again, unlike the branch model where there's more limited services, in the campus model, each campus gets full programming. So they do their own RE, they have a lot of social justice work, they do small group ministry, but they're under the auspices of the mother church. And this is, Peter Morales talks about cross borders, the idea of expanding our outreach to those who otherwise would not become Unitarian Universalists. And this is really the best example of how we're able to do that. The example, there are 3 examples of the campus model. The First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Diego has one campus in Chula Vista, and it's the campus, it's called the Unitarian Universalists of the South Bay. It's a full-service congregation, but it's under the auspices of the First UU Church of San Diego.
And Spanish-speaking.
Yeah, multilingual services. But they have full services every week. Another example is the Jefferson Unitarian Church in Golden, Colorado. They have a campus in Evergreen, Colorado, and they call it the Evergreen Campus. Again, it's a full-service church. They have religious education. They'll have rotating ministers that will come through. Quick question, Peggy?
I wasn't sure if by full service you meant full Sunday morning service? Or
Sunday morning service, religious education for children and adults. They have social justice, social action in the community. They have activities that go on during the week, as opposed to the branch model where it might be that a group comes together and sits in a semicircle and watches a sermon and then talks about the sermon afterwards, which is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't have the same kind of services that one would have under the campus model.
And if we had more time, one of the unique things that might be to highlight about the Jefferson model is, while it's full service, Jefferson's starting sort of smaller bite size. So even though it's full service, Evergreen doesn't hold their services every single weekend. They're building towards that. That's the goal. But they're moving, I think it's twice a month right now. But so there's little qualifiers we could get into more, but it shows that they're also using flexible models and evolving into the ultimate.
You know, sometimes there are subtle differences among these models, and nothing's set in stone. So this is an evolving system. The third example is the church in Harrisburg, which started in the suburb of Harrisburg. A few years ago, they bought a church in downtown Harrisburg, renovated it, and now they have two worship services, one on the suburban campus and one on the urban campus. They have religious education in both. The choir takes turns, alternating each month, singing in each of the two campuses.
Would the choir contain people from both congregations?
The choir consists, I believe it consists of people from both congregations,
Yes.
and they go back and forth. The third model is the merger model. Again, the characteristics similar to the first two: one board, one budget, one mission, shared staffing, one staff team. But then with the merger model, the model begins to change. This generally involves two existing congregations, where the first two models, there was a church and they created little baby churches. In the merger model, you tend to have two existing congregations or more, but for simplicity's sake, two existing congregations that come together. One might be the adopting church, the larger of the two, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's a strong sense of alignment and common identity. And the best example of that is the First Unitarian in Houston. So these were separate churches that merged with First Unitarian Houston and took on the name First Unitarian Houston. So there's a common identity among churches that merged together. And again, one board, one staff, one mission, similar to the other models.
How old were these other churches?
I'm sorry?
How old were the other churches?
I don't know, Deb. Does anyone know?
They range. I mean, but in 15 to 30, I mean, over 15 years each. They weren't newly formed churches.
Yeah, Thoreau dated from like the 70s, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not like 100 years, but I think we're looking.
It was quite old.
But again, the major difference with the merger, and then you'll see with the yoke, is that these were congregations that were already in existence that merged with another congregation. In this case, they merged with a larger one in order to share resources and become stronger.
And so you're saying that the Thoreau Stafford campus still exists and the Museum District campus still exists.
Yes.
And so all the campuses still exist, but they all call themselves First Unitarian Houston.
Yes.
Okay,
and they're
gotcha.
starting to work on a different, right?
Yeah.
They're even thinking about the name.
Yeah, gotcha.
So you can see the risk that these congregations are taking.
Yeah.
They're giving up their identity. I mean,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of risk involved in all of this.
Yeah.
The last model is the yoke model.
Well, yeah, and before you pass the slide, before you do the other slide, just the next slide, for my friends that are here, I put in and I meant it affectionately.
And it's funny, I was going to say, this is Scott's slide. This is Scott's slide. This is the yoke model. So, as Scott tells me, you can see that these people look different and they may have different characteristics, but they're both pulling in the same direction, which is really a great analogy for the yoke model. This is where two congregations, existing congregations, come together. Unlike the merger, though, They have separate boards and separate budgets, but they're shared staff and they're shared programming. So they retain their individual identities. So they don't, one doesn't blend into the other. They maintain their separate identities, but they begin to share resources. It's kind of, it can be a final step, but it can also be an intermediate step to a merger, where both congregations really take on the same DNA. And the example of that, and we added this piece to show that it can grow toward a common mission once the two congregations start working together. And the example of that would be First U Rochester and Canandaigua, which some of you are intimately familiar with. An example of a yoked congregation, and you might, as we go through our time together, maybe speak to that and how well that's working.
So now there's a deeper what. So I want to, now we're trying to get your, having pictures of multi-site, Mark and I thought it'd be important to try to get your mind into the sort of the why. In a sense, it should be the deeper why. So this isn't just a model or way of organizing. This is a strategy for growth, which we'll go into. So I'm going to go over each of these in detail. But the first one we'll talk about is how this is a strategy for growth. We'll talk about how this is a strategy for staff health and honoring staff strengths. Multi-site is. This is a strategy for empowering lay ministry more dynamically than maybe we do as solo churches. And this is a strategy for embodying our theology more than we do as individual churches. So quickly now, and again, if we have more time, we go into all these more detail. This is going to be the cliff notes of all these. So I'm gonna whip through all these, and then we'll take a deep breath and hopefully have a little time to discuss. Okay? So multi-site allows us to do all four of these things. And take a minute to look at these, because in your congregation, you know, everybody's going to probably going to be coming at it from these four needs or aspirations, so to speak, but you may be stronger in one area or the other. Your rationale may be stronger in one area or the other. So the biggest one has to do with a strategy for growth. Okay, this is the most complicated thing, and this is sort of my story. So what you're seeing here is what I think is a type of way of thinking your way into why we would do multi-site, but this is also exposure to Scott's brain. What you're seeing here is what led me to even introduce the idea and get excited about it. So, as a strategy for growth, before I even thought multi-site, I started with a few assumptions. Number one, I started with the assumption that sharing our faith is not optional. That whether or not what you do when you reach a certain size is optional, but growing and sharing is not optional. We open our doors and welcome people, and we want to share our faith. We are not pigs. Once we get in and we get something good, we don't just hold on to it, we want to share it. That is what our faith believes. Now, what's optional is, in churches where you grow, you have options after that. You can grow your church even bigger, or multi-site is one where you can grow through adding a building or starting to partner with other buildings. Does that make sense? So that's one assumption that led to multi-site for me. Growth also, the assumption is growth is inevitable. You've heard Peter Morales, my boss now, go off, talk a lot, go off, that's terrible. Sorry about that, Peter, the camera's on. Strongly speak inspirationally about how we are a religion for our time, right? So growth is inevitable, but I would argue if we organize for it. So in other words, selling our religion is not hard anymore. You know, Unitarian Universalism is at every arts theater right now in the movies, right? So there are many people who agree with us, spiritually not religious. But the challenge is to organize in order to be able to grow in my mind. And to grow, I still take seriously, I think most of us do, staffing for growth is key. We won't go into that, but is everybody familiar with about staffing for growth? That's not the only thing that makes a church grow, but every organization consultant will say, if you do not take staffing for growth ratios seriously, good luck. You know, and when you look at churches that grow, almost always, it's not the only factor, but it is always present. You are staffed for growth, which usually means a ratio of 1 program staff to 100, versus 1 to 150, which is staffing for maintenance, versus 1 to 200, which is staffing for decline. But staffing for growth is key. And then this has hit me as I looked at myself and at all congregations. Staffing for growth, while it is key, is not something most congregations can do on their own. This seems to me the brutal facts and assumptions of our movement right now. And why is this the case? I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in the Christian tradition, so I know there are only 4 horses, but I came up with 5 horses, all right? So there are 5 things that are in the face of all of our congregations. Rising healthcare costs. We all are struggling knowing what that's doing to our budgets every year. Rising energy costs. We've all seen that. Luckily, it's tailed off a little bit, but we all know what that's like. Building maintenance costs. Whether you're in a giant building where I was at First Unitarian with huge upkeep costs, or you're even in a small building where you're struggling to still pay off your mortgage or do upkeep, this is a major struggle. The other one is our covenantal fair share dues. To be part of a movement and to equally share, this is a challenge for folks. And then also to pay our staff fairly. All of these create the inability to staff for growth. And what I mean by that is that I don't know any, I would say it, I don't think this is hyperbole, I don't know any congregation or movement that can show me a 5-year business plan to handle all 5 of these things. What they can show me is a plan to cheat, to get staffing for growth, right? I don't know any congregation that can handle all of these and keep staffing growth ratios. So what many of us do when you analyze them is we struggle to keep covenant. And the way we get it is we staff for growth, we either break covenant with our congregations by not paying our dues, or we break covenant with those who serve us by not paying fair share. And so in the end, what we end up doing is artificially staffing for growth by asking, in many cases, our staff to overwork, which they often gladly do. So you need 5 staff to be staff for growth, you have 4. But the 4 work because it's so passionate and if you're growing. So this is a situation that we're wrestling with in a lot of cases. Now, I would argue, as I wrestled with this, multi-site came into the picture for me. So multi-site allows you to share and combine resources, creating economies of scale, okay, eliminating redundancies, which, and I'll go through even the details in a second, which allow us a different and more healthy path to staffing for growth. Now I know I'm going quick here and you're like, well, wait, why are we talking about staffing for growth when this is a multi-site piece? But I really believe they're connected when we're thinking about why is multi-site not just an optional strategy for us, but might be one of the key strategies our movement has to develop if we're serious about growth. And now I'm going to try just to visualize this. And I think this is going to be obvious to you, but I just think it's helpful to get it up here. So our current model, just think about right now. So going back, our current models of siloed ministry. We have 2 ministers delivering 3 or 4 sermons a month, delivered once. Dawned on me when I was at First Unitarian, we had 3 ministers. My wife, the associate, myself, we'd spend 30, if we had to read a book, I don't know how long it takes you to read a book, 20 hours, if the sermon goes bad, there's that. So 30 to 60 hours, 3 ministers, 30 to 60 hours doing that sermon once and putting it on the shelf. And then you look around in my region, and all of a sudden I'm seeing 5 of us doing this, and I'm thinking, that is a poor use of amazing resources. But that's what we do. We have redundancy here. The same thing you can see with religious education. You see 2 religious educators. And this is an example of, like, in 2 congregations. You could do this a whole bunch of different ways, but if you just took 2 congregations and you looked at the redundancy, it becomes blatantly obvious, although I don't know why it hasn't popped for us in neon lights. 2 religious educators, 2 whole different programs, 2 sets of small group materials being independently and separately developed by a whole bunch of people, 2 sets of lay leaders doing governance, budget drives, sitting on committees, doing the same duplicative work, 2 sets of administrators doing same activities with payroll, 2 sets of tech volunteers managing websites and Facebook pages, etc., etc., etc. All of it equals redundancy and trapped capacity. You with? I know I'm going fast, folks, but is this okay? Keep moving, you're getting it. So, capacity unleashed is just one example. And again, you can get this isn't hard, but there's power in just watching it pop on the screen for me. This is one way of thinking about it. So we move. Multi-site allows us to move from 2 ministers and 6 sermons. Can you all see over here? Or am I in your way? Okay. Go ahead and move. You know, actually, that'd be great. Yeah. Actually, I need to see my cheat sheets because that makes me sound smarter than I am. All right, so we move from, yep, go ahead and keep hitting it. Okay, we go from 2 ministers doing 6 sermons to 2 ministers doing 3 sermons. Hit the next button. Boom! All of a sudden, excess energy, you get this. Now, this is real. I mean, I would say my own experience of, I was able, once I started to do less sermons, I had time to do more. And folks in Canandaigua will, I mean, can you raise your hand that this kind of stuff I worked on when I was down? Hired me for a quarter time position, and I was able to do a ton more than other colleagues. All right, next. You can keep hitting again. Same thing in the old model. Goes to 2 DRAs doing 1 Sunday prep, if you were to share it, which allows more time for parent groups, youth work activity. And keep it. Again. Same idea here. 2 governance teams, 2 canvas teams. If when you move to 1 governance group, now this is assuming a merged, but 1 governance group, 1 canvas team frees up. More time for what we all talk about with lay leadership capacity. You know, leadership development. How many of us say we really need a leadership development team, and then we can't find people to stay on it or recruit people to do it? Same thing with pastoral care. Okay. And then, let me just look at that. So, again, you're getting this, right? Is it making sense? So, the summary part is it's the same level of staffing producing more programming, 2 ministers producing the output, and again, I don't mean to single out ministers, I honor religious educators. Also, the idea of professional staff being able to produce the output of 3 or 4. We see, in the case of REs, you can have a situation where 1/3 DRE is producing full-time when there's shared work going on. And again, staff for growth without being out of covenant with our UUA, our region, and our staff. And again, this doesn't have to be your rationale. For me, it mattered a lot. Covenant, it matters to us all, being in relationship and being able to handle what I talked about as those 5 horses of the apocalypse. So now let's go real quick to staffing for, that was about growth, remember? So I'm going to really whip through these guys. I'm sorry, but I want us to have time to talk. Staffing is also a strategy for staff health, right? So, unleash capacity. Remember those little slides where I said it could allow the minister to do social justice? Well, unleash capacity does not have to result in more work. It can be devoted to a healthy workload. So, instead of going from 2 ministers doing 6 sermons to 2 ministers, 3 sermons, and all this, you could just let your staff not do these extra 2 and still get the cake. Like, how much icing is there? That's still a lot of icing. You could let the minister and your staff do other things. Right? Imagine that. I know there's ministers in the room, right? So there's also a piece here about if it's evangelical and your professionals are on board, there's a way in which you can use this overflow for growth. There's another way that we can also use it to make our systems kinder to those who give so much to us. Next would be honoring staff strength. I wish I had time to go into this more, but so what we have in our current model, right, with the duplicative services, right, 2 separate congregations, 2 ministers doing all this. Again, I could have brought up RE as well, but this is just simple. What we have in our current siloed system is the myth of the well-rounded minister. And it's the idea that not that you have to do these things, but you have to be good at all these things. And there's another sense in which, when you're in the ministry, and I hope all the lay leaders here know this, there's a huge burden to be under that myth. You have to play not just to your strengths, but your Achilles' heels. I'll say when I served Maine Memorial in Syracuse, that church did get the best of me. Absolutely got the best of me when I was a solo minister. It also got the not so hot part of me, right? When I went to First Unitarian, which was a larger staff team,
which that's what we're talking about, multi-site, larger staff teams. But when I went to First Unitarian, all of a sudden, I tell you, my blood pressure is down 10 points. Because on a staff team now, all of a sudden, I could play to my strengths. And at that time, we had Jen Crow, who was an associate minister, and my wife, where they could cover things I didn't do well would be their strengths. So what you have, in a sense, in a multi-site, we have 2 ministers in serving 2 congregations together. You can divide the work up differently, allowing these people to serve to their strengths. Is that making sense? Mm-hmm. So it's another gift. It's another gift that multi-site has. The next one would be a strategy for empowering lay ministry. So again, when you eliminate the administrative and volunteer redundancies, it reduces administration overhead, meaning just less time, frees the laity from ministry, and I would argue gives us in our congregations actual priesthood of all believers, not just committee chairs for all believers. Right? Because the administration is a ministry, and I hate to say it, but the administrative pieces of the church you can't blow off. You have to have volunteers to draw on your board, on your campus. You can't do that. And if you trap all that capacity in those meaningful administrative roles, the ability to then really invite people to do priesthood of all believer stuff in lay ministry and small groups is significantly depleted or undermined. You go to the next one. So the other piece to get you is not just freed laity, but I would argue equipped. So don't forget, as staff have excess time, they can do the social justice, they can do the direct work. I would argue multi-site also gives ministers the chance to be coaches of coaches. Not do the direct work, but start to put a lot of more effort into coaching, which they can start to do. Leadership development and volunteer support. You can hit the next one. Oh, whoops. Yeah. So I would talk about, again, equipped and supported leaders are better leaders. Again, not to put down how good of a job we're doing in our churches to equip lay leaders. But again, a multi-site option, when you have capacity freed up, you allow your staff to be able to be coaches and midwives of a stronger, what I would argue, a stronger lay leadership system without having to overwork. I don't argue many of our professionals are doing a great job of coaching, but I bet you they're adding it over and above to their work when they do it. The next one and final one would be, is just a strategy for embodying our theology. I'm a preacher, so this is the one where I wish I could spend 20 minutes on, but Mark told me he'd walk over and kick me if I did. Go to the next one.
He did say
this piece here, I could go into it more, but I hope it goes without saying. There's something that's passion, that's to be able to move from these siloed individual congregations we're in to being much more bound together. Even, I would argue, if it didn't produce economies of scale, I would argue makes us more Unitarian Universalists. There's no way, in my view, you can look at a diagram or an org chart of how we organize our congregations and say, that reflects our values. That reeks of our main Unitarian Universalist values. And I think multi-site starts to do that as a unique way of saying, this is a model that represents our theology. And the other piece I want to highlight is it allows us to bring in a new piece of our theology. I really want to give credit to San Diego. How they are a church that's thriving, and they could have totally focused their resources on just being bigger and more with the same. But they said what we want to do with our overflow is we want to become something wider and more and different and get outside of our walls. And so to set up the bilingual campus in a different area of town to reach out and make I love Meg's talk today, make the definition of who us is bigger. It's just really powerful, and also is the thing that multi-site would help us pursue. You can